The grand ballroom of the Westmore Hotel sparkled under the light of crystal chandeliers. Men in crisp black tuxedos and women in flowing gowns filled the room, their laughter mixing with the gentle clink of champagne glasses. It was the annual charity gala, where tickets cost more than what most people earned in a month. The wealthy and powerful of the city had gathered to support children's education, or at least, that's what they claimed on their tax forms. In the corner of this glittering scene stood May, a 17-year-old girl in a simple black dress that had seen better days. She tugged nervously at the too short sleeves as her eyes swept across the room. The dress had been borrowed from her cousin for this one night, and it pinched uncomfortably under her arms. She didn't belong here among these people who casually discussed summer homes and private jets. She was only present because her mother had worked as the head chef at the hotel's restaurant for the past 5 years, and they were short-staffed tonight. Remember, smile and be invisible, her mother had told her earlier that evening as she adjusted May's collar. These people don't want to think about who's bringing their food or taking their coats. Just do your job and we'll get the extra money we need for this month's rent. May nodded and lifted a silver tray of delicate appetizers, careful not to spill anything on the plush carpet that probably cost more than her mother's entire kitchen. As she moved between groups of guests, offering tiny bites of food with names she couldn't pronounce, most people took without even glancing at her face. She might as well have been a floating tray for all they cared, but May didn't mind being invisible tonight. It gave her a chance to watch, to listen, to peek into a world so different from her own small apartment with its leaky faucet and noisy radiator. And it also meant she could steal glances at the thing that had caught her attention from the moment she entered the room, the magnificent grand piano sitting on a small stage. At the far end of the ballroom, it wasn't just any piano. Even from across the room, May could tell it was special. Its polished black surface gleamed like a midnight lake, and its lid was propped open, revealing the complex inner workings like the secret heart of some magnificent beast. A sign beside it read, "Steinway Concert Grand Piano, kindly do not touch." Each time May completed a circuit of the room with her tray, she found herself drifting a little closer to the piano. It reminded her painfully of the old upright that had once stood in her grandmother's tiny living room. That piano had been nothing like this gleaming masterpiece. It was scratched and slightly out of tune, with 3 keys that stuck and a bench that wobbled. But it had been everything to May. From the age of 6, she had spent every Sunday afternoon at that piano. Her grandmother, who had once played in a famous orchestra back in her home country before war forced her family to flee, had placed May's small fingers on the yellowed keys and shown her how to coax music from the aging instrument. Music lives in your heart, not in the piano, her grandmother always said when May complained about the sticky keys. A true musician can make beautiful sounds even from broken things. For years, that piano had been May's escape, her joy, her way of speaking without words. She had learned to play classical pieces from her grandmother's tattered sheet music books, then taught herself pop songs by ear, and eventually created her own melodies that told stories of everything she couldn't say out loud. But 3 years ago, when her grandmother got sick, the piano had to be sold to help pay for medical bills. And after her grandmother passed away, there was no money for lessons or even a keyboard. Music became something May only heard, never made, like a language she was slowly forgetting how to speak. "Hey girl, the trays won't refill themselves," barked a voice, snapping May out of her memories. She turned to see Mr. Gavin, the event coordinator, glaring at her. His thin mustache twitched with annoyance as he pointed toward the kitchen. "Less daydreaming, more working? The Henderson group at table 5 needs more champagne." "Sorry, sir," May mumbled, hurrying toward the kitchen with her now empty tray. In the kitchen, chaos reigned as cooks shouted orders and servers rushed in and out with plates of tiny, artful portions. May's mother was bent over a dessert tray, carefully placing edible gold leaf on chocolate mousse cups. She didn't look up as May passed, too focused on making each dessert perfect for people who would probably take one bite and leave the rest. May loaded her tray with champagne flutes and headed back into the ballroom. As she served table 5, she overheard snippets of conversation. "Completely ridiculous. The pianist is stuck in traffic and won't be here for at least an hour," said a woman with diamonds sparkling in her gray hair. "Well, Nora is absolutely furious," replied a man with a red bow tie. "She planned this entire event around Yoon Sung Kim's performance. Apparently, There was a pileup on the highway and his car is trapped behind it. Can't they find a replacement? Surely someone at this gathering can play a few simple pieces to entertain us until he arrives, suggested another woman, waving her hand dismissively as if playing concert piano was as easy as snapping her fingers. May's heart quickened at this news. The famous pianist wasn't here yet. The magnificent piano sat unplayed, waiting. For the next half hour, May continued her duties, but her mind was elsewhere. She watched as Nora, the event planner, paced near the stage, repeatedly checking her phone and whispering urgently to various important-looking guests. The background music, a generic classical playlist coming through hidden speakers, had stopped, leaving the room filled only with the buzz of conversation. During a lull in service, May found herself standing near the back wall just 20 feet from the piano. No one was paying any attention to the serving staff now. Most guests had finished their appetizers and were waiting for dinner to be announced. Several people looked bored. Before she could talk herself out of it, May set down her tray on a nearby empty table and took a few steps toward the stage. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. What was she doing? If she got fired, her mother would be devastated. They needed this job, but the piano called to her like a living thing. 3 years without touching a keyboard. 3 years of music building up inside her with nowhere to go. She glanced around. No one was watching. Mr. Gavin was busy at the bar. Nora was still on her phone near the entrance. May took another step, then another, until she stood beside the magnificent instrument. Up close, it was even more beautiful. The craftsmanship evident in every curve, the keys gleaming like perfect teeth. The sign said, "Not to touch." But surely that was meant for the guests who might carelessly set drinks on its surface or bang on the keys for fun. Not for someone who knew how to treat a piano with respect. May ran her fingers lightly over the smooth wood of the piano's side. It felt cool and alive under her touch. She glanced once more around the room, then slowly, carefully slid onto the bench. It felt both strange and familiar to sit at a piano again, like returning to a home she'd been forced to leave. She placed her hands above the keys, not yet touching them, feeling the magnetic pull between her fingers and the ivory. Just one piece, she thought. Something quiet that no one would notice. Then she would go back to work, and at least she would have this small stolen moment of connection with music again. Just as her fingers lowered to touch the keys, a sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "What do you think you're doing?" May's hands froze above the keyboard as she looked up. A woman in an expensive red dress was approaching the stage, her face twisted with shock and anger. She wore a name tag that identified her as a board member of the charity. "Get away from that piano immediately," the woman demanded, loud enough that people nearby turned to look. "That's a priceless instrument, not a toy for the kitchen help to play with." Heat rushed to May's face as more people turned to stare. She began to stand, wanting nothing more than to disappear when the woman continued, her voice dripping with disdain. The audacity. "Did you think we wouldn't notice a server taking liberties with a $150,000 piano? Someone call security." A few people laughed. Someone whispered loud enough for May to hear. "Probably can't even play chopsticks." May's embarrassment turned to shame as she realized her mother might hear about this. How could she have been so foolish? So selfish. The weight of everyone's stares pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she started to back away from the piano. "I didn't mean any harm." "Well, harm could have been done," the woman in red snapped. "These instruments are extremely sensitive. The oils from untrained hands can damage the keys." More people had gathered now, their curious eyes fixed on the spectacle of a serving girl being scolded. May wished the floor would open up and swallow her whole. All she had wanted was to feel the joy of music again, just for a moment. Now she had created a scene that might cost her mother's reputation at work. She took another step back, ready to flee, when an unexpected voice spoke from the edge of the growing crowd. "Let her play. Let her play." The voice was firm but kind, coming from an elderly man who had been watching the scene unfold. He moved forward with unhurried steps, leaning slightly on a polished wooden cane. Despite his age, he stood tall in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, and the room seemed to shift as people made way for him. May recognized him from the photos hanging in the hotel lobby. This was Thomas Chen, the main donor for tonight's charity event and one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city. The woman in red faltered. "Mr. Chen, with all due respect, this girl is part of the serving staff." She has no business touching that piano. We're waiting for Yoon-sung Kim to arrive. And how long will that be, Diane? Mr. Chen asked, his eyebrows raised slightly. At least another 45 minutes, Diane admitted, her voice losing some of its edge. Mr. Chen nodded thoughtfully, then turned to May. His eyes were kind but searching, studying her face as if looking for something specific. Do you play, young lady? May swallowed hard. The attention of the entire room pressed against her like a physical weight. I used to, she said quietly. With my grandmother. And what would you play for us if given the chance? He asked. May's mind raced through the pieces she knew. The music that had once flowed from her fingers before life had taken that joy away. What could she possibly play that would be good enough for this room, these people? Chopin, she finally said. Nocturne in E-flat major. It was my grandmother's favorite. Something flickered in Mr. Chen's eyes, recognition perhaps, or memory. That's a challenging piece, he said. Diane scoffed. Mr. Chen, surely we aren't going to let a kitchen girl experiment on a concert grand while our guests wait. It's inappropriate and, frankly, embarrassing for everyone involved. A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. May felt her cheeks burn hotter. I find, Mr. Chen said slowly, that life offers too few opportunities to be surprised, and I, for one, am tired of predictable evenings. He turned to the crowd with a smile. What do you all say? Shall we have some impromptu entertainment while we wait for our scheduled performer? There were mixed reactions, some curious nods, some uncomfortable glances. But no one directly opposed Mr. Chen. His donations funded half the charity's annual budget, after all. He turned back to May and gestured toward the piano bench. Please, he said simply. May hesitated. This was no longer a private moment stolen in a busy room. This was a performance with everyone watching, judging. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. You don't have to, Mr. Chen added quietly, so that only she could hear. But sometimes the things that frighten us most are exactly what we need to do. May thought of her grandmother, who had fled her home country, with nothing but the clothes on her back and her music in her heart, who had cleaned houses and cooked in restaurants until she could afford a small apartment and that old, out-of-tune piano. Who had taught May that music wasn't just about playing notes, it was about telling your story when words failed. What would her grandmother say right now? With a deep breath, May turned and sat down at the piano. The bench was higher than she was used to, the keys wider and smoother than her grandmother's old upright. She placed her hands on the keyboard, surprised by how right it felt, like coming home after a long absence. The room had fallen completely silent now. May closed her eyes, trying to shut out the staring faces, the expectations, the judgment. She thought of her grandmother's small living room, the smell of ginger tea, the afternoon light filtering through lace curtains, and then she began to play. The first notes were tentative, her fingers remembering their way across the keys after years of absence. But the piano responded to her touch with a sound so pure, so perfect, that it took her breath away. This wasn't the slightly out-of-tune upright of her childhood. This was an instrument that captured every nuance, every subtle shift in pressure from her fingertips. As she moved deeper into the piece, something happened. The nervousness fell away. The ballroom disappeared. The staring eyes and whispered comments faded into nothing. There was only the music, flowing from some hidden place inside her that had been locked away for too long. The nocturne bloomed under her hands, its gentle opening giving way to more complex passages. Her fingers found their strength, their certainty. The melody sang above the harmonies, telling its story, sometimes hopeful, sometimes touched with sadness, but always moving forward. May didn't just play the notes as written. She played them as her grandmother had taught her, with the slight hesitations and emphasis that made the music breathe. She played them with everything she had felt over the past 3 years. The loss, the longing, the love that remained even after her grandmother was gone. As she reached the middle section, where the music grows more intense, she could almost hear her grandmother's voice. Let it speak, May. Music isn't just in your fingers, it's in your heart. And so she did. She let the music speak of everything, of nights spent listening to her grandmother's stories, of dreams deferred because of poverty, of beauty found in unexpected places. Her fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence, drawing sounds from the magnificent piano that filled the ballroom like light. When she reached the final gentle passages, Returning to the piece of the opening theme, May felt tears on her cheeks but didn't stop. She let the final notes linger in the air, her hand still resting lightly on the keys as the sound faded into silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. She kept her eyes closed, afraid to break the spell, to return to reality where she was just a server who had overstepped her boundaries. Then the applause began. It started with a single person, Mr. Chen, and spread quickly through the room, growing from polite to enthusiastic to thunderous. May opened her eyes in shock, seeing people standing, some wiping away tears of their own. "Extraordinary," said a voice near the piano. A tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses had approached during her performance. He looked at her with intense interest. "Young lady, where did you study?" I didn't," May stammered, overwhelmed by the attention. "My grandmother taught me until I was 12. After that, I just played on my own." The man looked stunned. "No formal training? And you play Chopin like that?" Before May could respond, Diane pushed her way forward, her expression transformed from disdain to calculating interest. "Well, what an unexpected treat," she said, her voice honeyed now. "You've certainly saved our evening, dear. Such a delightful surprise to find such hidden talent." May recognized the change for what it was. Not genuine appreciation, but the rapid recalculation of someone who had misjudged a situation. She said nothing, unsure how to respond. "Play something else," called a woman from the crowd. Others joined in, encouraging her with calls and applause. May looked to Mr. Chen, who nodded slightly. "If you wish to continue," he said. Her heart still racing from the first performance, May turned back to the keys. What should she play next? Another classical piece? Something modern? Her fingers hovered above the keyboard as she considered. Then she remembered something her grandmother used to say. "When in doubt, play what makes you feel most alive." With newfound courage, May began to play, not another classical piece, but one of her own compositions. It was a melody she had created after her grandmother died. A piece that had existed only in her mind for 3 years with no piano to give it life. It started simply with a repeated pattern in the left hand like steady footsteps, while the right hand played a questioning melody above it. As the piece developed, it grew more complex, the two hands engaging in a kind of conversation, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in counterpoint. There were echoes of the traditional music her grandmother had loved, blended with more modern influences that May had absorbed from the world around her. It was neither fully classical nor fully contemporary, but something uniquely hers. The crowd listened in rapt silence. This was not music they recognized, not something they could categorize or compare to known works. It was something new, something honest, something that spoke directly from one heart to another. When she finished, the applause was even more enthusiastic than before. People were standing, calling out praise, looking at each other with expressions of delighted surprise. Mr. Chen was smiling broadly now, his eyes bright with something that looked like triumph. The man with the wire-rimmed glasses leaned in again. "That second piece, who composed it?" he asked eagerly. "I did," May said softly. "It's called Remembering Light." His eyebrows shot up. "You composed that? My dear girl, do you have any idea?" He stopped, collecting himself. "My name is Dr. Huang. I'm the head of the music department at Westmore University. We need to talk about your future." Before May could process this, there was a commotion at the entrance to the ballroom. A slender man in a formal suit rushed in, followed by assistants carrying instrument cases. Yoon Sung Kim, the scheduled pianist, had finally arrived. As the famous musician was ushered toward the stage, May quickly stood up, ready to retreat back to her role as an invisible server. But the crowd wouldn't have it. They called for her to stay, to be properly introduced. Mr. Chen raised his hand and the room quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I believe we've witnessed something remarkable tonight. Before our distinguished guest artist performs, I would like you to properly meet." He paused, looking at May. "I don't believe I caught your name, my dear." "May," she said simply. "May Jiang. May Jiang," Mr. Chen repeated with a strange emphasis that made her look at him more closely. "A young woman of extraordinary talent who, until tonight, has been hiding her light from the world." Something in the way Mr. Chen said her name made May's skin prickle. He was looking at her with an intensity that went beyond appreciation for her music. There was recognition in his eyes and something else, something that looked almost like hope. But before she could make sense of it, Yoon Sung Kim approached the piano, his expression curious rather than annoyed at finding someone else at his instrument. He was younger than May had expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with a quiet confidence in his movements. "That was quite an entrance," he said to May with a slight smile. "I heard the end of your playing as I came in." "Chopin, yes? Very beautifully done." May nodded, speechless that a world-famous pianist was complimenting her playing. She began to slide off the bench to make way for him, but he gestured for her to stay. "And the second piece?" he asked. "I didn't recognize it." "It's her own composition," Dr. Huang answered before May could speak. "The girl is entirely self-taught after age 12. Yoon Sung's eyebrows rose. He turned to the crowd with a warm smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems I've arrived at my own performance to find the audience already captivated by another artist. Perhaps with your permission we might try something different tonight." The crowd murmured with interest, and Nora, the event planner, looked simultaneously horrified and fascinated by this departure from her careful schedule. Yoon Sung turned back to May. "Would you consider playing a duet with me? Something improvised, perhaps?" May's heart nearly stopped. Play with Yoon Sung Kim? It was like being asked to climb Mount Everest when you'd only just learned to walk. I couldn't possibly," she began. "I think you can," he said simply. Then lowering his voice so only she could hear, "Music is a conversation. You've clearly been speaking this language all your life. Just listen and respond." Somehow his calm confidence steadied her. May nodded slowly and shifted to make room for him on the bench. As he sat beside her, she noticed his hands, strong but gentle-looking, with long fingers that moved with easy grace as he positioned them over the keys. "A simple theme to begin," he said. "Just follow where it leads." He began to play a melody so simple and clear it could have been a children's song, just 8 notes that formed a question in music. When he repeated it, he nodded to May, inviting her to answer. Hesitantly, she played a responding phrase, echoing his notes but changing the last 3 to form a musical answer. Yoon Sung smiled and built on what she'd played, adding harmonies beneath the melody. May listened intently, then joined in, her right hand playing a counter-melody above his theme. What happened next was unlike anything May had ever experienced. Without words, without sheet music, the two of them began to build a piece together. It was like having a conversation where each understood exactly what the other meant. When Yoon Sung introduced a minor key section that sounded like gentle rain, May added arpeggios that sparkled like droplets. When she shifted to a faster rhythm that felt like running, he supported it with strong chords that gave her notes somewhere to land. The audience watched in amazed silence as the impromptu duet unfolded. Here was their scheduled star performer playing alongside a serving girl as if they were longtime musical partners. The piece grew and changed, sometimes playful, sometimes deeply moving, always surprising. Neither pianist knew where it would go next, but each trusted the other to follow. At one point,
May recognized that Yoon Sung had subtly introduced elements of the Korean folk music he was famous for incorporating into his compositions.
she responded by weaving in hints of the Chinese melodies her grandmother had taught her. Their different musical heritages didn't clash but complemented each other, creating something entirely new. As they built toward a finale, their 4 hands moving across the keyboard in perfect coordination, May felt a joy so intense it was almost painful. This was what music was meant to be, not just notes played correctly, but hearts connecting through sound. For these precious minutes, she wasn't a poor girl with a borrowed dress and an uncertain future. She was simply a musician, speaking the universal language of music with another who understood. When they finally brought the piece to a close with a series of harmonies that resolved into a peaceful major chord, the room erupted. People weren't just applauding, they were cheering, some even dabbing at tears. Yoon Sung turned to May with genuine respect in his eyes and gave her a small bow from the waist. "Thank you for that gift," he said. Overwhelmed, May barely registered what happened next. Yoon Sung stood and pulled her gently to her feet, presenting her to the audience as if she were his equal. The applause grew even louder. Dr. Huang was speaking excitedly to several well-dressed people near the stage. Diane, the woman in red who had tried to shoo May away from the piano, was now smiling broadly as if she'd discovered May herself. And through it all, Mr. Chen watched with that same strange intensity, his eyes never leaving her face. When the applause finally died down, Yoon Sung addressed the crowd. I believe we've all witnessed something extraordinary tonight. While I'm happy to continue with my planned program, I think we should first hear more from Ms. Zhang. Perhaps another of her original compositions. More applause and calls of encouragement followed. May looked around in disbelief. Just an hour ago, these same people had seen her as nothing more than the girl carrying their drinks. Now they were calling for her to play again, looking at her with admiration and curiosity. Perhaps a short break first, suggested Mr. Chen, seeing May's overwhelmed expression. I believe Ms. Zhang and I have some matters to discuss. Before May could respond, her mother appeared at the edge of the crowd, still wearing her chef's coat, her face a mixture of confusion and concern. She had clearly been called from the kitchen to witness the commotion involving her daughter. May, what's happening? Her mother asked in Mandarin as she approached the stage. Mr. Gavin said you were playing the piano instead of working. Are you in trouble? May started to explain, but Mr. Chen stepped forward and addressed her mother in perfect Mandarin. Mrs. Zhang, your daughter has shown extraordinary talent tonight. I believe we have much to discuss, all three of us. Her mother's eyes widened as she looked more closely at Mr. Chen. Something passed between the adults, a flash of recognition that May couldn't understand. Perhaps we could speak privately, Mr. Chen suggested, gesturing toward a small anteroom off the main ballroom. May and her mother followed him, leaving behind the buzzing crowd and a curious Yun Sung. As they entered the quieter space, May noticed her mother's hands were trembling slightly. You recognize me, don't you, Lin? Mr. Chen said softly to her mother once the door closed behind them. May's mother nodded slowly. You look like him. Your father. I wasn't sure until you spoke Mandarin. Mr. Chen turned to May. Your grandmother's name was Hui Zhang, wasn't it? And she played with the Beijing Symphony before the Cultural Revolution? May nodded, confused. How did you know that? Because, Mr. Chen said gently, Hui Zhang was my father's younger sister. Your grandmother was my aunt. The room seemed to spin around May. That would make you your mother's cousin. Your first cousin once removed. Mr. Chen's eyes were bright with emotion. I've been searching for your family for 20 years. May's mother sank into a nearby chair. We thought all of Hui's family was gone. She lost contact with everyone during the revolution. When we came to America, she tried to find them, but my father was sent to a labor camp, Mr. Chen explained. When he was finally released, he managed to leave China, but by then he had no idea where his sister had gone. He searched for years. After he died, I continued the search. But how did you know it was us tonight? May asked, still trying to process this revelation. Mr. Chen smiled. I didn't, not until you played. You see, that Chopin Nocturne was my father's favorite piece as well. He said his sister played it beautifully, with a distinctive style, lingering slightly on the high notes in the middle section, adding a small hesitation before the final return to the theme. When I heard you play it exactly that way, his voice broke slightly. It was like hearing a ghost. You play just like her. May felt tears forming. All these years they'd thought they were alone in the world. Just the three of them, and then just two after her grandmother died. And all along they had family searching for them. I don't understand, her mother said. How did you happen to be here tonight at this exact event? I'm on the board of the charity, Mr. Chen explained. I attend every year. But the real question is, how did you come to be here, Lin? Working as a chef when your own family had such talent? May's mother straightened her shoulders. We came with nothing, Thomas. I taught piano to make ends meet, but when she got sick, the medical bills took everything. I had culinary training in China, so I cooked to support us. It was honest work. Of course, Mr. Chen said quickly. I meant no disrespect. I only meant things can be different now, for both of you. He turned to May. That talent of yours, it shouldn't be wasted. Not when I can help. Help how? May asked cautiously. Education, for one thing. Dr. Huang is already interested in you for the university's music program. I can ensure you have the best teachers, the best opportunities. He paused, looking between mother and daughter. And perhaps most importantly, family. Real family, after all these years. There was a soft knock at the door, and Nora, the event planner, peeked in. Mr. Chen? The guests are wondering when the program will continue. Mr. Kim is ready to perform, but everyone is asking about the young lady. Mr. Chen looked at May. It seems you've made quite an impression. What do you say? Are you ready to go back out there? May glanced at her mother, who nodded encouragement despite the tears in her eyes. This night had already changed everything. Her relationship to music, how others saw her, and now even her understanding of who she was and where she came from. "I'll play one more piece," May decided. Something for grandmother. She always said music could build bridges across time and distance. I guess she was right. As they returned to the ballroom, May felt different, taller somehow, more certain. The borrowed dress that had felt so wrong before now seemed unimportant. What mattered was the music waiting to flow through her fingers, and the unexpected family she had found through that music. The crowd welcomed her return with warm applause. As she took her place again at the magnificent piano, she saw not judgment in their eyes, but anticipation. Even Diane was watching with genuine interest now. May placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. Tonight she would play for her grandmother, for her newfound family, and for herself, the girl who had been silenced for too long. And then, she began. May closed her eyes and let her fingers find the keys. This time she played a traditional Chinese melody that her grandmother had taught her, a folk song about the moon watching over separated loved ones, bringing them together again in dreams. It was a piece her grandmother played on nights when she seemed lost in memories of the home and family she had left behind. As May played, she added her own touches to the familiar tune, weaving in elements that spoke of loss and reunion, of broken connections mended. The melody soared and dipped, sometimes joyful, sometimes touched with the bittersweet pain of years spent apart. Under her hands, the grand piano sang with a voice that seemed to reach across oceans and decades, telling the story of her family's separation and unexpected reunion. When she finished, the silence in the room was complete. Then Mr. Chen, her cousin, she reminded herself with wonder, was the first to applaud, his eyes shining with unshed tears. The rest of the audience followed, their applause warm and genuine. Yoon Sung Kim approached the piano again, bowing slightly to May. "Beautiful," he said.
"Now, if you'll allow me, I'd like to perform the piece I prepared for tonight."
"Perhaps you would turn pages for me?" It was a generous gesture, a way to keep her on stage, acknowledged as a fellow musician rather than sending her back to the kitchen. May nodded gratefully and moved to the side of the bench as Yoon Sung seated himself at the piano. He arranged his sheet music, and May took her place beside him, ready to turn pages. For the next 30 minutes, she watched in awe as his hands flew across the keyboard, bringing to life complex pieces that she had only dreamed of playing someday. Yet there was something different now in how she listened. Before tonight, she might have felt only intimidation at such mastery. Now she felt inspiration and possibility. As Yoon Sung played his final piece, a thunderous Rachmaninoff concerto adapted for solo piano, May studied his technique, the way he used his whole body to create power when needed, and then instantly shifted to delicate control for the softer passages. There was so much she could learn, so much she hadn't known was possible. When he finished to enthusiastic applause, Yoon Sung surprised everyone by turning to May once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been told that Ms. Jang has been without a piano for several years, yet she plays as she does tonight. Imagine what she might do with proper instruction and daily practice." He turned to Mr. Chen. "Thomas, I believe your foundation sponsors young musicians, does it not?" Mr. Chen smiled broadly. "Indeed it does. And I believe we've found our next recipient." The crowd broke into applause again, and May felt her face flush with equal parts embarrassment and joy. So much was happening so quickly. Just hours ago, she had been an invisible server with a borrowed dress and a silent heart. Now she stood on stage being offered opportunities she had never dared to dream about. Dr. Huang approached, business card in hand. "I'd like to arrange an audition for you at Westmore University as soon as possible. With what I've heard tonight, I'm confident the scholarship committee will be most interested." Diane, the woman in red who had initially tried to stop May from playing, now hovered nearby with a completely transformed attitude. "Such a discovery. You must come to our donor reception next month. Many of our supporters are patrons of the arts." May felt overwhelmed by the attention, by the sudden shift in how these people saw her. She looked for her mother, and found her standing near the edge of the stage, watching with a complex expression, pride mixed with concern, joy shadowed by something like worry. As the formal part of the evening concluded and guests began to mingle again, May made her way to her mother's side. "Mom, are you okay?" Her mother smoothed a hand over May's hair, a gesture from childhood. You were wonderful, she said softly. Your grandmother would have been so proud. But, May prompted, hearing the hesitation in her mother's voice. Her mother sighed. It's all happening so fast. These people. This world. It's not our world, May. I don't want you to be hurt if they forget about me tomorrow. May finished. If all their promises disappear in the morning? Her mother nodded, her eyes sad with the knowledge of how the world often worked for people like them. That was excellent thinking. Lynn, said Mr. Chen, approaching them with 2 glasses of champagne, which he handed to May and her mother. Always wise to be cautious. But I assure you my interest in May's future is not a passing fancy. She is family, my family. And beyond that, she has a gift that deserves nurturing. He turned to May. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering an investment in your talent and the chance to know the family you never knew you had. May looked between her mother and this newfound relative, trying to process everything. What happens next? She asked simply. First, we get you a piano, Mr. Chen said firmly. Tomorrow I'll have one delivered to your home. Nothing extravagant, but something good enough for daily practice. Then we arrange proper lessons, perhaps with Professor Wu at the conservatory. He specializes in talented students who've had unconventional training. And school? May's mother asked. She's in her final year of high school. We'll make it work, Mr. Chen assured her. Education comes first, of course, but there are flexible programs for students with exceptional talents. And next year, perhaps Westmore University, if that's what May wants. Yoon-sung Kim joined them, a glass of water in hand. I'll be in the city for 3 more days giving master classes at the conservatory. I'd be happy to work with May if she's interested. May nearly choked on her champagne. You would teach me? Yoon-sung smiled. After our duet tonight, I'm as curious as everyone else to see what you'll do next. Besides, it's not every day I get to work with a true natural talent. As they talked, more guests approached, wanting to meet the evening's surprise star. May found herself shaking hands with the mayor, a famous author, the owner of the city's basketball team. People who would never have noticed her existence a few hours earlier. They asked about her background, her training, her plans. Some offered business cards mentioning connections who might be interested in her talent. Through it all, May felt strangely calm, as if she were watching herself from a distance. Was this really happening? Would it all vanish when the clock struck midnight, like in the fairy tales her grandmother used to tell? As the evening began to wind down, Dr. Huang approached with a serious expression. Mr. Chen, if I might have a word about May's future. The 2 men moved slightly away, deep in conversation. May's mother touched her arm. I need to check on the dessert service, she said. Will you be all right for a few minutes? May nodded, and her mother hurried back to the kitchen, leaving May momentarily alone at the edge of the crowd. She took a deep breath, trying to center herself amid the swirl of events. Quite a night for you, said a voice beside her. May turned to see Nora, the event planner, looking considerably less stressed now that the evening was nearly over. You know, when I saw you at that piano, I was certain you were about to embarrass yourself. And me, since I'm responsible for everything that happens at these events. May wasn't sure how to respond, but Nora continued with a rueful smile. Goes to show we should never judge a book by its cover, or a pianist by her uniform. She nodded toward a group of servers clearing tables. That could still be you right now if you hadn't found the courage to touch those keys. The observation hit May with unexpected force. Nora was right. If she hadn't taken that risk, if she hadn't overcome her fear and shame to play when given the chance, none of this would be happening. Her life would have continued on its previous path, working part-time jobs to help her mother, dreaming of music without the means to pursue it, never knowing she had family searching for her. One moment of courage had changed everything. Thank you, May said to Nora, for not having me thrown out when I first sat down at the piano. Nora laughed. Oh, I was about to, but Mr. Chen intervened, and I've learned never to argue with the man who funds half our operating budget. She patted May's shoulder. Remember this feeling, this moment when your life changed. And the next time you're scared to take a chance, remember what happened when you did. As Nora walked away, Mr. Chen and Dr. Huang returned, both looking pleased with their conversation. We've been discussing your immediate future, Mr. Chen said. If your mother agrees, I'd like to sponsor your application to Westmore University's Young Artist program. It would allow you to complete your high school requirements while receiving conservatory-level music training. And based on what I heard tonight, Dr. Huang added, I'm prepared to recommend you for a full scholarship. We would need to arrange a formal audition, of course, but that's merely a formality at this point. May felt dizzy with possibilities. A full scholarship? Professional training? A real chance to develop her gift? I don't know what to say, she stammered. Say nothing yet, Mr. Chen advised gently. Discuss it with your mother. Think about what you truly want. Music is a demanding path, and while you have extraordinary talent, it must be your choice to pursue it. Yoon-sung rejoined them, holding a business card which he handed to May. My personal email, he explained. I meant what I said about those master classes. 3 days starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come if you can. As the evening drew to a close, May found herself standing with her mother and Mr. Chen near the now quiet piano. The hotel staff were cleaning up. Guests were collecting coats and saying goodbyes, and the magical atmosphere was slowly dissolving back into ordinary life. What do you think, Mom? May asked quietly. Is this real? Will it last beyond tonight? Her mother looked at Mr. Chen thoughtfully, then back at her daughter. I think, she said slowly, that your grandmother always said music opens doors. She was more right than she knew. She took May's hand and squeezed it. But whatever doors you choose to walk through must be your decision. May looked back at the piano that had changed her life. In the dimmed lights of the emptying ballroom, it seemed to be waiting for her, not just for tonight, but for all the tomorrows to come. 6 months later, May sat in a small practice room at Westmore University, her fingers moving through scales with a fluidity that still sometimes surprised her. The room was plain but perfect. Soundproofed walls, a well-maintained upright piano, and a large window that let in the afternoon light. On the music stand sat the piece she was preparing for her first public recital, Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, challenging even for pianists with years of formal training. A knock at the door interrupted her practice. May looked up to see Dr. Huang peering in, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the light. How's it coming along? He asked, entering when she waved him in. Better, May said, flexing her fingers. I'm still struggling with the coda, though. It's so fast and my hands aren't used to that kind of movement yet. Dr. Huang nodded. That's why we practice. Your hands are learning a new language of movement, just as your mind learned music theory. Both take time. He checked his watch. Speaking of which, don't forget you have a lesson with Professor Wu at 4. May smiled. I won't forget. He'd never let me hear the end of it. As Dr. Huang left, May turned back to the piano. So much had changed since that night at the charity gala. True to his word, Mr. Chen had a piano delivered to the small apartment she shared with her mother the very next day. Not a flashy grand, but a quality instrument that made their living room feel too small and their lives suddenly larger. She had attended Yoon-sung Kim's master classes, terrified but determined. He had been demanding but kind, pushing her to think beyond technique to the emotion and story behind each piece. Your fingers can play the notes, he told her, but it's your heart that makes music. Before leaving the city, he had recorded a recommendation for her university application, his name carrying significant weight with the admissions committee. With Mr. Chen's sponsorship and Dr. Huang's advocacy, May had been accepted to Westmore's Young Artists program with a full scholarship. The program allowed her to complete her high school requirements in the mornings while spending afternoons and evenings focused on music, theory classes, private lessons, ensemble work, and hours of practice. It hadn't been easy. After years without formal training, May had significant gaps in her musical education. She could play beautifully by ear and intuition, but her sight reading was weak, her knowledge of music theory almost non-existent. Some of the other students, most from wealthy families with years of expensive lessons behind them, looked down on her, whispering about charity cases and affirmative action. There were nights she cried from frustration and exhaustion, her fingers cramping from hours of scales and exercises. There were moments she wondered if she belonged in this world of competitive excellence, where every student seemed determined to outshine the others. But then there were the other moments, when a difficult passage suddenly unlocked under her fingers, when Professor Wu's stern expression softened into rare approval, when she lost herself so completely in a piece that time ceased to exist. Those moments made everything else worthwhile, and through it all, her mother and Mr. Chen had been her anchors. Her mother had taken on fewer shifts at the hotel to be home more, supporting May through the transition. Mr. Chen had become a regular visitor, bringing old photos of May's grandmother as a young musician, telling stories of the family May had never known existed. Slowly, the hole left by her grandmother's death was being filled with new connections, new understanding of who she was and where she came from. May checked the clock and began gathering her sheet music. She had just enough time to grab something to eat before her lesson with Professor Wu. As she left the practice room, she passed other students rushing to classes or rehearsals, some carrying instrument cases, others balancing stacks of music books. This world still felt new to her but less foreign with each passing day. She recognized more faces now, had made a few friends, mostly fellow scholarship students who understood what it meant to be an outsider in this elite environment. Outside, the university campus was alive with activity. Students lounged on the grass enjoying the spring sunshine. Professors hurried between buildings with coffee cups in hand. Tour groups followed guides who pointed out historic buildings. May cut across the central quad, heading for the small cafe where she usually grabbed a quick sandwich between practice sessions. As she walked, she spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the music building. Diane, the woman in the red dress who had tried to stop her from playing that fateful night. May hesitated, then changed direction to approach her. "Ms. Mercer," she said politely. Diane looked up from her phone, taking a moment to place May's face. "Ah, the piano girl," she said, her tone warmer than it had been 6 months ago. "May, isn't it? How are you finding Westmore?" "Challenging," May admitted. "But good. I'm learning so much." Diane nodded, studying May's face. "Dr. Huang tells me you're progressing rapidly. He's quite impressed, and he's not easily impressed." May wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected praise from a woman who had once looked at her with such disdain. "Thank you," she said simply. "You know," Diane said, setting her phone aside, "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about you that night based on nothing of substance. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The apology caught May completely off guard. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, uncertain. "It's okay," she said finally. "You couldn't have known." "That's just it," Diane said, her expression serious now. "I should have waited to know before judging. It's a lesson I'm still learning, apparently." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'm on the board for the Young Artist Showcase next month. You should consider auditioning. It's excellent exposure. Arts patrons from across the country attend." With that, she nodded goodbye and walked away, leaving May staring after her in surprise. Another door opening. Another opportunity she couldn't have imagined half a year ago. By the time May reached Professor Wu's studio for her lesson, her mind was buzzing with possibilities. The Young Artists Showcase was a prestigious event, featuring only the most promising students. Did she dare try for it after just 6 months of formal training? Professor Wu greeted her with his usual stern nod. He was a compact man in his 60s with perfect posture and expectations to match. He had been a child prodigy in China before coming to America to study, and he accepted nothing less than total commitment from his students. "You are thinking very loudly today," he observed as May arranged her music. "What troubles you?" May explained about the showcase and her uncertainty. Professor Wu listened without expression, then sat on his piano bench and played a quick, complex series of chords. "When I first heard you play," he said, "I thought, here is a wild talent like a vine growing without direction. Beautiful, yes, but chaotic, untrained." He played another series of notes, this time with perfect structure and precision. "Now I hear the training beginning to support the natural gift. The question is not whether you are ready for the showcase. The question is, are you willing to work hard enough to become ready?" It was typical of him, not answering directly, but challenging her to rise to the occasion. May considered his words as she took her place at the second piano in his studio. "I'm willing," she said finally, "if you think it's possible." Professor Wu's expression remained stern, but his eyes softened slightly. "Good, then we begin now. Ballade from the beginning, and this time think of the story you are telling." For the next hour, May worked harder than she ever had, repeating passages over and over until her fingers ached. Professor Wu was relentless, stopping her mid-phrase to correct a fingering, adjust her wrist position, or demand more emotion, more precision, more everything. By the end of the lesson, she was exhausted but exhilarated. The piece was starting to take shape in a way it hadn't before. Not just notes played correctly, but a story told through sound, each phrase leading naturally to the next. "Better," Professor Wu said when she finished, which from him was high praise indeed. Practice the coda for 2 hours tomorrow. No more, no less. Your muscles must learn but not become injured. As May packed up her music, she felt a strange sense of calm certainty. 6 months ago, she had been a girl with a borrowed dress and a silenced gift. Now she was a student with a path forward, challenging but clear. Outside the music building, twilight was falling. Campus lamps created pools of light along the pathways as students hurried to evening classes or dinner. May pulled out her phone to check the time and saw a text from her mother. Dinner with Thomas tonight. He has news about summer program. Don't practice too late. Another opportunity, another door. May smiled to herself as she headed back to the practice rooms. She would work on the coda for 1 more hour, then head home to hear what Mr. Chen had to share. As she walked, she thought about that night, 6 months ago, when everything had changed. She remembered the feeling of standing on the edge of possibility, terrified but unable to resist the pull of the music. She remembered the moment when shame had transformed into courage, when silence had given way to sound. One choice, one moment of bravery when it would have been easier to walk away. The practice building was quiet now, most students gone for dinner. May found her usual room, turned on the lights, and sat down at the piano. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the cool smoothness beneath her fingertips, the potential waiting to be released. Then she began to play, her music filling the small room and spilling out into the hallway beyond. No longer a secret gift, but a voice that had found its freedom. A voice that once heard could never be silenced again.